Welcome to Geopolitics Demystified. I'm your host, S.L. Canton. Today we have a brilliant guest from the Philippines. Her name is Anna Malindog, and she does so many things. She's a VP and a senior research fellow at a couple of think tanks. She's a regular columnist, a geopolitical analyst, and she's also doing her Ph.D. now at the Peking University. So we'll talk to her about the Philippines, China issue, some history, geopolitics, and what would be the best way to achieve peace in South China Sea. Welcome, Anna.
Thank you so much, SL, for inviting me, and I hope I can shed light as to what is happening in the Philippines in relation to China, in relation to the United States, and in relation, of course, to the region, the Asia-Pacific region, the sub-region, Southeast Asia. Thank you so much. It's really a privilege to be part of this program.
Same here. Wonderful. So to start with, can you provide us a big picture about the geopolitical contest between the Philippines and China? So we all know that there are some struggle with the islands in South China Sea, where both countries, they claim the islands belong to them. So, is that the only the contest between them, or is there something else that the rest of us are missing? And also, what are all the common things that bind the Philippines and China?
Okay. It's a very quite a the question I will break down into in responding to your question, I'll break it down into several topics. I think first the first thing that I would want to emphasize is like that South China Sea, as far as I'm concerned, and many other people in the region, especially the claimant states, it is contested, and it is contested in a sense that you have different claimant states, and that would include the Philippines, China, Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, and the island of Taiwan. So if you really look at the claims, it's overlapping maritime and territorial claims. There are claimant states like China, Vietnam, I think, and even Taiwan, that the claims is historical sovereignty over some of the islands that they are having contestation. The Philippines, I think, when you talk about its claim, it's based on UNCLOS, and it's pretty much on the exclusive economic zone, which if you really look at the contention between exclusive economic zone and territorial sovereignty, there's a big difference, because you may have an economic zone, but you only have sovereign rights, and that's not necessarily the same when you talk about sovereignty, because when you say sovereignty, you really own the place, but sovereign rights, you just have certain rights to exploit some resources within that area that you claim. So if you really look at the South China Sea, the dispute is not simple. It's really complex. However, if you look at China being the biggest and the huge among the different claimant states, I think China is the huge participant in there in terms of size, in terms of capacity, and in terms of economic power, and even military, and it has a growing influence in the region for that matter. I think the claim of China, that's why it's very contested, and even you can see that Vietnam and China and Philippines and China is precisely because the claim of China overlaps with the EEZ claim of other claimant states, and even with Vietnam. So this really is very complicated, and I don't think there's really a one-way solution to this. But I think the most important when you talk about the South China Sea dispute is really talking it out. Negotiation is the way, and diplomatic and peaceful solution to it. For me, to be very honest, SL, the way I see it is you just have to consider, if only this claimant state can consider the South China Sea as a regional public good where everyone benefits, and they just have to agree on how they can possibly exploit and share resources. Because one, I think, of the contention and debate, and why is it that, like, for example, the Philippines and China, even Vietnam, is really active in their claim and very assertive, precisely because there's also an issue of access to resources, and that one is maritime resources, like, for example, fishery, and then the other one is more on oil and gas, because it is being said that some parts of the South China Sea is very much rich in oil and gas. Then going back to your question as to the dynamics between China and the Philippines, because these are the two active claimant states at the moment, and it seems that my country, to be very frank, is very noisy. Every now and then there's skirmishes, and the focus of attention is not just other claimant state, it's really China always. But if you really look at the Philippines and China over the contested waters of the South China Sea, the one thing that I can see that my country has interest is more on resources. It's access to the natural resource in the South China Sea. Basically, that would include fish or having the right fishing rights, and the other one I think is oil and gas. For me, that's the economic side of it. But if you put it in a geopolitical perspective, I don't think really it's between China and the Philippines. Really, I don't. Because we are not like a big power or a major power in the region. It's actually the way I see it. If you broader the dynamics and the picture, it geopolitically speaking, it's really between the United States and China. It just so happened that under this current administration of Ferdinand Marcos Jr., we are somewhat a semi-colonial state of the United States at this time. So in a way, what is happening to the United States is because of the geopolitical rivalry and competition between China and the United States. In the context that you have a peaceful rise of China, China's influence in the region is growing, and also you have this too has also to some extent competition who will control this maritime route and also access to the resources in the area. And also you have the United States pushing for this so-called rules-based order in the Asia Pacific region, specifically in the disputed South China Sea. And you have this freedom of operation, freedom of navigation operation in the South China Sea, which for me, to be very frank with you, this is not about commercial ships, but it's really all about United States warships freely navigating or just roaming around the South China Sea area, that it doesn't want other countries to say no to it. So they're pushing for it. So if you look at this context, my country is being used as a pawn by the United States against China, and the contested area really that is now being poked too much, and that you can see the skirmishes, the intensified tension between China and the Philippines is really the South China Sea. So that is the overall picture in there. So bottom line, I don't see my country really geopolitically that has competition with China in the overall scheme of things. It's not my country. It's really the United States. It's just so happened that the current administration of Ferdinand Marcos Jr. is a willing pawn. It is really a willing pawn. Whatever you say, however you say it, it's a willing pawn in a sense that its foreign policy is very much leaning to the United States, is beholden to the United States, and it is a difference. There was a shift from being an independent foreign policy to now a foreign policy that is leaning to the United States. And the approach even in the South China Sea from negotiation to a more active, it's a more belligerent approach by the current administration of Marcos Jr. to the South China Sea conflict vis-a-vis China. So that's the overall picture, or some kind of the general picture that I can tell you, especially when you talk about geopolitical landscape between the Philippines and China, and then you have an external force interfering in this issue, and that's the United States.
Yeah. And they always want to spread freedom and democracy to everyone. So talking about the U.S., the obsession, self-appointed spreader of freedom and democracy, can you tell us a little bit about the history of how the U.S. first got interested in the Philippines in the late 19th century, and what they did to the Filipinos? And, so like the last 130 years or so, the history in like, 5 minutes, if you can.
Okay. the period of 1898 to 1946 denotes the direct American colonization of the Philippines. The United States acquired the Philippines in 1899 after the defeat of Spain. But because before the American colonization, we were colonized for almost 400 or more than 400 years by the Spaniards. So there was a Spanish and American war. Spain was defeated by the Americans, so we were bought. We were sold actually for 20 million US dollars,
Wow.
and by the Spaniards to the Americans. And the Treaty of Paris was signed on that during that time. That was December 10, 1898. So that was the start of what you call American colonization in the Philippines. So and the thing here is like this. Why is it that the U.S. wanted a foothold in the Philippines? There are several reasons to it. First is, I think the Philippines has a strategic location, geopolitically speaking. So, when you talk about strategic naval bases in Asia, the Philippines is very strategic to it. So, the Americans can project power in the Asia Pacific region. Second, I think, is even during the colonization time is economic interest. We were exploited in many ways by the United States. They extract our natural resources, raw materials, and then we were like a market to them. And also, we were also the foothold in a sense when you talk about economy, because we were the new markets, like a new markets and resources in Asia. So through us, they have access to Asia Pacific. And then you have this so-called a grand agenda of the United States of promoting democracy and civilization, as if the Filipinos were uncivilized people, that they want to civilize us, they want us to be democratic. And these are what you call imperialistic justification of the United States during the colonization time. And even at that time, of course, if you look at history, the US was emerging as a global power vis-a-vis European colonial powers in Asia. So it has competition with European powers in Asia, and it just so happened that the Philippines in Asia was controlled by the United States. In a way, we're like really a foothold in that during that time. And so, but if you really look at how the American colonization, I would be fair with them to a greater extent. There were positive and negative. I think one of the positive thing is the educational system. Yeah, I think they introduced an educational system that is very good to us, and we learn English. Pretty much, the Philippines can speak English very well, most of us. But on the other hand, that is also a flip side to it, in a way that our mentality becomes so Americanized. Even until now, we're really like Americanized in every possible way. We're like a country in Asia that does not think like Asians, which I'm very sad about it. Really, I'm very sad, because for me, I grow up. I think I'm pretty much lucky to a greater extent, because my father was very strict, and he thinks like an Asian, and he's a Chinese, because I'm a half Chinese. So in a way, I was introduced to really strict Asian values. So, but if you really look at the demographic of the Philippines, we think like Americans, we act like Americans. It's very odd that we're in Asia, but the way we are make up is really American. So that's why it's sometimes you can see us sometimes think differently than other Asians. So that is really the reality. Even until now, it is. So and also during the American and Philippine War, the Americans was very brutal to the Filipino insurgents. They kind of torture us, and and killed so many Filipinos during the time. So it was a horrible time for Filipinos during the Philippine-American War, and it happens, no, and it's part of the whole thing.
So I have a
Now,
question. So when the Filipinos, they go to school, do they learn about the brutality of the American colonization?
no, not much. No, I'm not kidding. Because as far as I'm concerned, when I was in high school, I was in elementary or primary, I never really learned about American brutalization and how it exploited our country. I learned more about Americans being good, in a sense that they introduced education to us. They created some kind of they put up schools and university, like something like that. So then they kind of educate us and civilize us, something to that effect, but not so much on the brutal and the exploitation that the Americans did with the whole time that they colonized us. But the worst part of it is like this, no? So in after negotiation, rebellion, and trying to really fight for our independence, in July 4, 1946, we were given they gave us, according to them, they give us our independence. So it's like, wow, it seems like
Thank
we
you
did not
so
fight
much.
for
You're
it.
so kind.
Yeah, they give us our independence. However, this so-called sovereignty and independence that they give us, it suddenly was erased totally, precisely because they also some kind of put us in a situation that we are a semi-colony, because of the so many military treaties that they introduced, and they also maintain naval forces in the country. So, like for example, the Treaty of General Relation and Protocol and the Treaty of Manila, signed by the United States and the Philippines in 1946, established a new bilateral relationship between the two nations. This is after 1946. In which military bases would play a vital role. The Treaty of General Relation and Protocol acknowledged the Philippine sovereignty and control of the whole archipelago, but excluded U.S. military bases. So it seems like we Filipinos during the time, we have sovereignty all of the other places except the U.S. bases. We cannot control it. It's the United States who controls it. So what kind of sovereignty is that? And they maintained the Subic Bay and naval base as a naval base, and the Clark Air Base. And there's a lot of military soldiers during the time. So, this is really happening. And after another treaty that was introduced in 1951 and ratified in 1952 was the Mutual Defense Treaty. The Mutual Defense Treaty basically says that, in terms of external attack coming from anywhere or any country for that matter, the Philippines and the United States will come to its defense. So that's another. And until now, the Mutual Defense Treaty is still existing. So but before that, you have what you call the Military Bases Agreement and the Treaty of Manila that basically justify the Mutual Defense Treaty and make way for the Subic Bay Naval Base and Clark Air Base as a military bases in my country at the time. And that time, it's really a military installations, and you can see a lot of Americans there, lots of all of their assets, military assets was there. However, in 1991, I think there was a move. There was a movement, a nationalist movement that really clamored for the military bases to be out of the country. So that kind of sentiments, it's like a repeat of history that we want Americans out of the country. So there was a repeat of history, but in a different form. And that time in 1991, we want them out. We want the military bases to be closed. So there was a struggle also during the time. But even before that, one of the consequences of being an ally of the United States to the Mutual Defense Treaty and having military bases in the country during that time, not yet in 1991, but before 1991, is that the Philippines was, because we are a bilateral security ally of the United States, the Philippines was made who were requested to participate in American wars, like Second World War, 1941 to 1945, the Korean War, 1950 to 1953, the Vietnam War, 1964 to 1975, Persian Gulf War, 1990 to 1991, and Iraq War, 2003-2004. We were part of it precisely because of the MDT. And one thing that you have to remember, in the Second World War, the Philippines, we don't have problem with Japan. We are not an enemy of Japan at that time. But what happened to us? We were invaded and attacked by the Japanese. Not because we're an enemy. It's precisely because outside of the mainland United States, the biggest contingent of military assets and naval forces were in my country. At that time. So that's why that was the reason, that was actually the primary reason why the Japanese attacked us, and the country, my country, became the battleground between Japan and the United States. At that time, it's precisely because of the biggest military contingent of the Americans was in Asia, or in Southeast Asia, was in the Philippines. and and there is a sense of a repeat of history again, and this time it's in the context of a geopolitical rivalry and competition between China and the United States, and it seems that the battleground again will be my country. Not yet happening in a way that it's hot war or hot conflict, but now we're in some kind of seemingly Cold War 2.0, and the battleground in Asia is the Philippines. Seemingly, it's emerging like the Philippines. So that's in a nutshell, because it's a history, it's a long
Yeah.
history. So I
Yeah.
think this is the thing that is very important for our audience to understand.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, I mean, I was reading that in like 1991, the largest naval base that the U.S. had was in the Philippines. It was like a
Yes.
really, really huge base, and then they shut it down, and now they're slowly trying to come back and reestablish. So, what is the current situation of the U.S. military and naval bases in the Philippines? And what does the U.S. want in terms of the goals of the growth? Like what is their plan over the next few years for the Philippines?
Very. It's really nice that you mentioned that the U.S. military bases in 1992 actually was shut down. It's precisely because of the vote of 12-11 votes of the Philippine Senate. So we rejected and we say close already. But after some time now, in the current situation, there's a resurgence of and a strengthening of military forces in my country. And just to give a little bit of background, there are three agreements that are very important. Why is it that there's a resurgence of the military forces? The first one, I think, is the Mutual Defense Treaty, and we know that it's the basis why we are like the non-NATO ally of the United States in Southeast Asia, because we are an ally, a military ally, because of that treaty. And then you have the Visiting Forces Agreement. This is very important to how about it to tell to the public, precisely because the Visiting Forces Agreement justifies the rotational of troops in the Philippines. And then you have the EDCA, an Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, which basically it's an agreement that gives the United States the leeway to put up military bases inside Philippine military bases. They're saying it's sites, but at the end of the day, it's military base. And the thing here that is very funny is they circumvented the constitution of my country, because in the constitution it's very evident the Philippines should have an independent foreign policy. The Philippines should not host any foreign military forces, may it be in terms of troops, may it be in terms of base, and even nuclear
Wow.
weapons. It should not. Yeah, that is really in the constitution. It's very evident. It's written in that way. That's very you don't need to explain it. It's when you read it, you know already what it means. But they kind of circumvented it by saying that anyway it's rotational troops. So it means it's rotational. 500 now, then later 300, and then they would go back, and someone would come in, and they're just moving around the country. In a way, they justify that like that, and the military bases, they justified it like non-permanent. But this doesn't have any time frame. We don't know until when. So that is the circumvention that when they circumvented the constitution. Now the question is, why is it that it's important for us to understand this agreement? Precisely because this agreement are being used by the United States to have a hold on my country at the moment, and also to continue to militarize the country in many ways. Now the basic question here is, why is it that the United States is doing it? I mean, as a Filipino, I ask this question because every time I reflect on these issues, I'm asking the first question: do we have an enemy? Really, the Philippines, do we have an enemy? Is China our enemy? When you talk about the South China Sea dispute, which is disputed, yes, because we have different claimant states. And can it be solved through diplomatic and peaceful means? To be honest, yes, because you have seen it already during Duterte time, previous administration, that they were able to manage the conflict in a way that everyone is okay, and then there's not much skirmishes. There's no threat of a military conflict that will break out in that area. So if you really look at that, no, China is not our enemy. We have a dispute over the South China Sea, but other than that, all parts of our relationship with China is good. China is our largest economic partner, trading partner. When you talk about tourism, they're very important to us. When you talk about investment, economically speaking, in infrastructure, green energy, agriculture, and they give us a lot of benefits when it comes to these things. On the other hand, it's our largest market too, because China is a huge market for us, and we benefit from that. It gives us a lot of revenue. So if you really look at China in that sense, you have a very small part of the South China Sea as a conflict. Other than that, I don't see any conflict with China other than the dispute in the South China Sea. So instinctively, would you consider China as an enemy? Of course not. It's not. But if you really broaden the discussion in a bigger way, geopolitical speaking, well, given that my country right now is a pawn, so it becomes like the United States is creating a way for the Philippines to create an enemy out of China. And why are they doing it? Because if you really look at the United States, it wants to poke China in a way. It wants to contain China with this containment strategy and counterbalance strategy of the United States, but it is not ready. And it won't have a direct collision with China. It would not do that. So how would it poke China? It will use a proxy in the same manner of what happened in Ukraine. They want to what? They want to weaken Russia. And how are they going to do that? They use a proxy Ukraine. And look at what happened to Ukraine. In the same manner that the United States is using my country as a proxy, poking China. But it's not directly engaging with China in that sense. So, that is the plan of the United States that I can see. If you really look at it in a geopolitical perspective and geopolitical landscape, they really want us to be like the proxy and the pawn that will poke China. But the problem with that, SL, is like this. What if something happened? It's either in the South China Sea or in the Taiwan Strait, because you have the presence of 9 EDCA sites. And there are always risk of miscalculation in the ground, on the ground. So what if something happened? It's my country that will bear the consequence of these things. It's my country that will burn to ashes if in any case a military breakout will come out of this kind of poking China using us. It's not them. They're on the other side of the Pacific. They will not suffer directly. It's us who will suffer, because we will be the retaliatory attack will be directed to us first. Maybe the next it would be mainland USA, but we will die first before them. That's really the situation. If you really put it in a broader context, not just between Philippines and China, but put in the equation the United States, because they're really interfering in this dispute. The thing is, I don't understand with the United States. They are not party to the dispute in the South China Sea. They're not even signatory to UNCLOS. So, and then they use UNCLOS to justify their interference that, the China should respect UNCLOS and blah, blah, blah. But come on, before you even say that, that's hypocrisy. You don't use something when, in fact, you're not even a signatory to it. You're not even a party to it. That's hypocritical in every possible way.
As I was reading this article about how the Pentagon spread fake news in the Philippines about how dangerous the Chinese vaccines were. Wow.
Yes, it's true. I mean, I am even a victim of it, because I was in my country in 2021. I started my study on 2022. So around September of 2022, I was already in Beijing. But even before that, so we have this inoculation, and vaccination. And there's a lot of propaganda against the Chinese vaccine, that it is not effective, that you will die if you take it, that there's things like this. And I was like shocked. Why is it like this? And then suddenly now there was a news that it was actually orchestrated by Pentagon. And even Pentagon, there are some people in Pentagon he confirm about it. That this is really crazy. And this is part of what I'm talking to you, that this competition between these huge countries, and the battleground always is my country in Asia. And
Yeah.
it had a lot of impact in terms of lives. Many people avoided the Chinese vaccine. It's precisely because of this misinformation and disinformation. And the first country that helped us, when you talk about vaccination, the very first who give us the donation of a vaccine for free, that even President Xi asked the military aircraft to send it to us because we're almost late with our schedule of vaccination, was China. And then suddenly no one wants to take Chinese vaccine because of this disinformation being propelled by Pentagon. And then we were really, even I mean, like I was advocating that please take the Chinese vaccine. This is really good. And even I did the vaccination just to prove that, when you take the Chinese vaccine, you will be alive and you'll be healthy. I did it in my social media. It's because the intensity of that issue was so much during that time, and even until now, there's still residues of that. There's still residues. Many Filipinos still doesn't they don't believe that the Chinese vaccines are effective. And even until now, you see that the kind of, the influence in the minds of Filipinos of this American disinformation and misinformation. Until now, it's still there. It's hard to undo all these things. This is how the Americans are making fun out of us, and as if we're not human beings that we can just be fooled anytime. This is really, I get angry with this. It's precisely because we are intelligent people. Filipinos are not stupid. We can see it, but the problem is our government, especially now, it's hard. It's them. The leaders are they have so much interest that it's us and with tied up to the Americans, that they compromise what is our sovereignty, our independence, our national interest. Just to mention, SL, when you talk about national interest, we have the three important things: sovereignty, independence, and national economic development and prosperity. The two are already compromised, given what? The presence of the American troops. You have 9 EDCA bases. Many of these EDCA bases, or some of it, are located very near Taiwan, which makes the whole Taiwan Strait volatile, and China is anxious about it because these are American bases, and some of them also are located near the South China Sea. And what do you think of this? These are like forward operating bases of the Americans. In any case, whatever happens in either in the Taiwan Strait or in the South China Sea. Okay, so this is really crazy. This compromises our sovereignty and independence. Another one that this presence of American and the heavy influence of the Americans of this administration of Marcos Jr. it's compromising our economic interests, our economic prosperity and development. Why? Because we don't have good relation with China, politically and diplomatically. It's a very challenging relationship right now. And I understand China, if China will recalibrate or will reduce its investment in the country in terms of infrastructure, may it be soft infrastructure, may it be hard infrastructure, may it be aid in terms of agricultural inputs, if it will not anymore open its market to our products like our fruits, because we export many kind of fruits to China, and they like our bananas. But now our bananas are, nothing. I think we're replaced by Vietnam and Cambodia and even by South Africa in terms of we were number 1 before. Now it's not anymore the case. So in a way, this kind of, Americans using us as a pawn is also compromising our economic interests. And in terms of
because if the Philippines has very good relations with China, they can come and build the infrastructure, the high-speed rail, blah, blah, blah. And they can do a lot of really good stuff to help the economy.
But it's not happening. Though
Right.
though China is not yet totally angry with us, I think they're still
Mm.
trying to invest. They're trying to repair the relationship. But SL, we're not part of the Belt and Road Initiative. We pulled
Wow.
out from it. And
When did that
Malaysia,
happen? When
ah,
did the
ah,
Philippines pull out?
when there was a change in leadership.
Oh my God.
Oh, and now, and in terms of application, Malaysia, I think Indonesia and Thailand are applying for BRICS.
Hmm.
Right? They're lobbying to be part of BRICS. They're already part of the Belt and Road Initiative. And you can see tourism and everything they're benefiting. We're not even interested in BRICS under this
Wow.
administration. I said that we are losing a lot of opportunity by being part of this regional architectures, or
Hmm.
organization. Because I think we will benefit from it a lot
Yeah,
in terms of
absolutely.
market, in terms of in terms even of economic exchanges, and our country will benefit economically in this
Yeah.
sense. Just because
Okay.
BRICS is like from the as far as the United States and its allies in the West are concerned, it's like an orchestration of Russia and China, and then we're now heavily influenced by the United States. So we should not be part of it because China is there, Russia is there. So
Hmm.
we should not be part of it because these are adversaries of the United States. We're an ally of the United States. But that is a wrong logic, to be very frank. The enemies of the United States is their enemies. Whoever they want to be an enemy with, it's your problem, not ours.
Yeah, because the
It's
Philippines
really,
has to look at the future. What is the world going to look like 5, 10,
mm,
15 years from now? And it's not
that's
going
true.
to be dominated by the US. The dollar is not going to be the king of the world. So the Philippines has to plan for the multipolar world, and it has to hedge its bets. It has to say, okay, so let's be friends with China, BRICS, Russia, India. So whatever way the world goes, the Philippines will still be successful.
So that's why what I'm saying is during Duterte's time, just to connect with what you're saying, we have that already. We have that kind of path, trajectory that our foreign policy will be a friends to all, an
Mm,
enemy to none.
mm,
And then we will deal with all the powers in the region, major powers, may it be Russia, may it be China, may it be the United States, based on our national interests. And we have, we deal with them based on our national interests. And we will not allow them to dominate us, any of them, any of this major power. We will control our own destiny. And we know what we want as a country. That was really the path already during Duterte's time. And we're on that. There are struggle along the way because of COVID and other things, but at least it's very clear that I was so happy at that time, to be honest with you, SL, precisely because I was like thinking, at long last, the Philippines is now can consider itself as independent and sovereign, and we have our own destiny to take care of. That it's not leaning to the United States. We're not dependent on the United States because during Duterte's time, even in terms of military purchasing of military arms, because we need it for our armed forces, we don't really rely on the United States. We buy things from Russia. We ask aid from the Chinese. We go to South Korea to buy. We diversified. We're in on that process of diversifying even our military and defense relation, and we're already recalibrating and trying to look at if this MDT is still needed. Maybe it's not. In a multipolar world, we don't need it anymore. This BFA, this EDCA, will just do away with it. Probably we'll have a military cooperation with the United States, cooperation but not alliance or treaty. So we are on that track, SL. And we're so happy. Filipinos were proud that time. Like, yeah, we're not a colony. We're independent. We're Filipinos. We're not Americanized in that sense. We're not Filipino. Our face is like Filipinos, but there's an American out that's a shadow there. We're really proud, and at least on my side, I was like, yes, we're going there little by little, step by step. And then suddenly Marcos came into power. After probably 6 months, everything changed into something really different. Our foreign policy was changed to more leaning to the United States. 4 additional EDCA military bases of the Americans were approved. So many defense agreement and military pacts between NATO forces. And the latest, SL, is Germany. For the first time, our diplomatic and bilateral relations with Germany is not just about economics now. We signed a defense pact with them just last Monday, I think, or last week. So I said, why in the hell all of our acts that we sign is all about defense with Australia, with UK, France, Germany now, you have Italy in there, and you have Turkey, and then you have the biggest, the United States. All of these are NATO forces. My question is, do we really have an enemy, or the Philippines is being prepared for something out there that will happen in the future? A war with what? And a war with China? But that is not good for my country and even for the world. So that is even my question to the current administration of Marcos Jr. What is it that you really want out of the country? We don't need this defense pact. What we need is economic treaties or economic agreements with all of this country rather than this, defense pact. But it seems that it's proliferating. We have RAA, the Reciprocal Access Agreement with Japan, which is basically similar with the BFA. Japan can send troops and even military assets to my country and to train, quote unquote. Why do we have it? Why? I mean, I really don't understand. There's only one thing that I can think of. The country is being prepared for something that is not good for us.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Anna. And I think that your message is also relevant to the rest of Asia, because we see what is happening in Bangladesh, India. So the U.S. is the empire of chaos, and the Asians must come together and focus on peace and prosperity.
Yes, I totally agree. Thank you so much, SL, for the opportunity that you have given me. Thank you so much. And
Thank you,
in my country, we say mabuhay.
Mabuhay. Wonderful. All right. Thanks, Anna.
Thank
Bye
you.
now.
Bye-bye.